Hey team, welcome back to another episode of the Strength Game Podcast. I'm your host, Nick O'Brien, and this is episode number 161. The Strength Game is a weekly podcast dedicated to discussing all things physical culture with the coaches, athletes, iron enthusiasts, and experts deeply embedded in the strength game on both sides of the profession, both as coaches and as competitive athletes. I want to thank everyone who has liked, shared, commented, who has subscribed to the show and listened on all platforms, given us guests and feedback along the way. All your support allows us to continue to bring on expert guests and highlight more individuals in the strength game, just like our guest today. Also want to take this time to thank our sponsors. Samson Equipment has been providing uncompromising quality for over 40 years. Samson products are long-lasting and made of the highest quality equipment on the market. Each project is built from the ground up with the ability to customize every need. The team at Samson focuses on developing the highest quality relationships with their customers, in addition to providing them unparalleled quality in every piece of equipment bearing the Samson name. Learn more about Samson's professional weight room solutions and the Samson standard at samsonequipment.com. Also want to thank our sponsor, Cerberus Strength. Trusted since 2012, Cerberus is making the best strongman, powerlifting, and strength sports equipment and accessories, ensuring the ultimate competitive edge. Every one of their products is tried, tested, and proven by top-level athletes worldwide. So whether it's competing on the big stage at World's Strongest Man or training at the home in the gym, Cerberus strength equipment is reliable, durable, and of course, strong enough to handle all your training goals and needs. So if you're in the market for the highest quality strength conditioning gear and strongman equipment, be sure to check out CerberusStrength.com and use promo code STRENGTH_game to save on your next order. Also want to thank our sponsor, Sport Kilt. Born in Scotland and stitched in America, Sport Kilt offers the highest quality custom kilts and accessories. Every Sport Kilt is made in the USA of machine washable polyester blend fabric, offering an alternative to the traditional heavy wool kilt. Sport Kilt products are made for people who like to be active and make a statement while they train, compete, play, and adventure. Their kilts are designed for comfort, freedom, and style made for all the brave ways you move. Check out the No Pants All Glory selection of kilts and shop the best collection of high quality American made sport kilts and accessories at sportkilt.com and use our promo code TSG to receive an extra 10% off your next order. And in this week's episode, I am joined by Joe Connolly. Joe is the head sports performance coach for football at Arizona State University. Connolly arrived in Tempe in 2018 after serving as the director of sports performance at the University of Massachusetts Amherst for 2 years, primarily working with the football program. Prior to UMass, he was the director of strength conditioning at the University of South Carolina. Connolly oversaw the training for the football and track and field programs at South Carolina for 7 seasons from 2009 to 2015. Connolly got his start coaching in 2007 at Harvard University, where he assisted with all 41 athletic teams. Following a year stint with Harvard, he spent 1 year as an athletic performance coach for football at the University of Louisville before joining the Gamecocks for his longest stop. Connolly is a master strength conditioning coach through the Collegiate Strength and Conditioning Coach Association, earning the highest honor in the profession in 2022. He was awarded Football Scoop Strength and Conditioning Coach of the Year in 2024 and was a nominee in 2026 for the NSCA's Collegiate Strength and Conditioning Coach of the Year. Over his career, Coach Connolly has worked with over 45 NFL draft picks, including the 2014 number one overall pick, and has been a part of 11 bowl games. A former 4-year baseball player at the University of Hartford, Connolly has shifted gears from his college playing days, but has still found a way to stay active himself both in and outside the weight room. Connolly is an avid lifter with dedicated time under the bar. Since his time on the diamond, he stepped on the platform, competing in both drug-free powerlifting and Olympic weightlifting, as well as strongman and Highland Games. Like I said, I'm excited to have him on the show today. So with all that said, let's get in the game with Coach Joe Connolly. What's going on, everybody? I'm excited. We're coming all the way from Tempe, Arizona over there. We've got the great Joe Connolly on the show today. How you doing today, Coach?
I'm doing good, man.
Hey,
I
I'm
go by
excited to
I
have
go
you
by
on.
I go by Joe.
Hey, I know, but we got to make sure everybody knows. We got Coach Joe on the show. I'm excited to kind of get dive into all this stuff. We got a lot of kind of topics that we could touch on. You've had a long, illustrious career so far. I mean, still doing great things over there, going into season 9 with ASU football. Um, but I kind of want to take it back a little bit, just really to like your athletic career, like what kind of got you involved in sports, training, like kind of how'd you find the barbell before you became a coach?
Yeah, no, I appreciate you having me on. I think for me it started in high school. Um, I I sort of we had actually a pretty decent gym at my high school, and I got hooked up with a couple of older guys that were lifting weights, and we didn't really know what we were doing, but I sort of fell in love with the bar at that point in time, and then you know, luckily I was pretty good at it. Kind of right from the start. I was relatively strong and um, I liked the process and the consistency of it. In college, I had a great strength coach, Emil Johnson, who trained me for 4 years. So, in reality, I tell a lot of people this. I think I actually enjoyed the off season more than I enjoyed the in season when I was in college. I like the training part a ton, and I think at the time I didn't really realize it because as a young guy, you still have these crazy dreams of being a professional athlete, and um, it's not that easy. And but oftentimes I was better in the weight room than I was on the field, and so yeah, that kind of I got done playing baseball and went back home, graduated, went back home, was messing around in a few different things, had a few different careers outside of, anything athletics related. Was actually a firefighter. Got my EMT, was kind of going that route and kind of woke up one day after maybe 6 months or a year, I can't remember exactly, and decided that I loved fitness. I loved training. I loved performance. And it was something I always did, but I just never it never clicked that it could be a career. And so I actually called up Emil and asked him how do I become what you are, and went back to school, got my master's degree from Bridgewater State in strength and conditioning and competed on the Olympic weightlifting team there and away I went.
That's interesting. I didn't realize that that was kind of the path. There was a little bit of a little block in between that you
Yeah.
actually like weren't sure about making that a career and then it kind of clicked for you later. I've heard so many coaches say the same thing too, like that the off season and training the weight room was really kind of where they found like a passion for coaching, but like it just didn't click that like you could make it a career or coaching was the thing for you. Like, what do you think it is about the off season that like coaches that end up getting involved in strength conditioning? Like, why like the off season more than the in season? Like, is it something internal? Is it just you are a better weight room guy, or like what's the thing that like really kind of was the motivating factor for you to be like, maybe I like this more than the actual sport itself?
Well, I think for me it was more the strain and the effort and the nuance to everything. And then, secondarily to that, it's not about playing time. It's not about, you know, the sort of politics of athletics. It's not about any of that. It's about everybody kind of gets theirs. And everybody's going to do the same exercises for the most part. Everybody's going to be giving the effort the same way, and there's a tangible response and a tangible thing right after the set that I think is, second to none in regards to immediate feedback. And so for me, that was always really reassuring. And again, I, on the field, it, you don't always get what you want, right? You're competing against somebody else, but in the weight room, you're competing against yourself, and you're competing against an object instead of another human being. So I always enjoyed that, and the confidence that you can build in the weight room is just it's addicting.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, that confidence that you build, and even though it is immediate feedback, it's not like instant gratification. Like you have to see the development. You have to, like you said, put the strain and the effort through, and everybody is doing the same training and they have the same opportunity to I mean, earn their playing time in a sense but at the end of the day, some people are just more skilled and they're not going to train. They're not going to take the same opportunity to get under the bar and do the same amount of work someone else is. But some of those individuals that are just workhorses may never see the end of the day. So it does build a lot of confidence. How do you kind of work with some of your athletes that you see are the workhorses, but they're not necessarily getting the same maybe look on the field? Like maybe someone that was not saying you were a bad player, but saying you're in a similar situation where, hey, this person really is embracing the weight room, the work ethic, this grind that we're doing to get better, but they're not getting that look that they're getting on the field. Like, is that an ongoing conversation you're having with some of those individuals, versus the ones that are just field studs but don't really maybe take training as like intense as some of the other guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody's message that they receive should be different. It should be nuanced. It should be based on the experience you have with them, their experience throughout the whole kind of organization. And I think as a strength coach, I think that's got to be really nuanced and something that you're keyed into on a daily basis. You have a athlete that has been with you for a couple years that has learned a lot of the lessons, but maybe needs a few words of advice along the way. And then you have a new athlete that doesn't know what they don't know, and they need a lot of the 100 level classes versus the 4 or 500 level classes. And still, even though, we were talking before, like things have changed quite a bit, but you still defer back to the basic lessons with everybody and, the situations and putting people in certain situations and training because that those situations will probably come up in the actual sport. Doing that, I think, is something to be said, is something to be, certainly aware of and to try to facilitate. And then, individual conversations they'll never depreciate. Those things will be important forever, I think. And um, I try to do that as often as I can with an individual. You get to know, your team really well. You spend so much time with them that when somebody walks down the stairs, you notice that maybe they walk down the stairs a little bit different today than they did yesterday or the day before that, or maybe their demeanor when you address them and say good morning is a little bit different. So you can kind of tell, and as much as you can, you got to nip that in the bud and try to figure out what's going on so you can get to the work.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's interesting too, talking about obviously we talked about before we kind of got recording, just the nature of the beast of how college athletics is running, especially football and some of the premier sports, the money sports, in a way, let's just put it at that.
Yeah.
and NIL and all these athletes that are constantly moving, better opportunities, like financial, whatever it is. Um, but you talk about developing those relationships and having individual conversations with players. Football, basketball, some of these sports that like you have a strength coach assigned or a strength staff assigned as well. You spend so much time with those athletes that you can develop those relationships. But you're still seeing so much movement with this transfer portal and everything. How do you and like your staff take like kind of a deliberate approach to actually kind of build some rapport and understand these athletes, kind of learn about where they're coming from, what their experiences are, and kind of build some confidence and get the best out of them because some of them you're only going to see for maybe a couple months. They might leave. You might have a couple that stay for a few years, but you're trying to, like you said, develop those individual relationships quick. Is it something that just like it's going to take time? You might not ever actually get like that full relationship with them. Or is it like an approach that you guys take to like really sit down and maybe have one-on-one conversations as soon as they get on campus?
Yeah, I think you have to be really strategic with your time, and you certainly can't waste any time. Not to say that in the old days when you had a kid for 4 or 5 years, or a young man for 4 or 5 years, or a young athlete for that long, that you would waste time, but you had more time, I guess. And now I think you have to have structure and you have to have a plan. And, plans are meant to be deviated from, but there should be a set structure. That's actually something that, I've been doing this, I don't know, 19 years, 18 years, something like that. And I just recently kind of created basically a curriculum for new athletes coming into our program, and it was sort of something that I've been thinking about for a while. And then I sat down with our head coach, Kenny Dillingham, and was like, okay, like we have our pillars of our program, we have our mantras, we have our, rules. Now, how do we onboard these athletes as effectively as possible to get them up to speed? And then how do we give a voice to the compelled athletes, the athletes that, you know, are basically extensions of us already because they've been here a little while. And then how do we get, everybody basically up a level? And what does that, curriculum and structure look like? And how does it basically take a program that has all these different departments doing all these different things, including the locker room, and get everybody on the same page as quickly as possible?
Yeah, that's a great way to do it too. Like you do have to be very strategic with it, it seems like. And if you never know, like you could have a mass exodus of like seniors or players that are getting drafted or any sort of like even coaching change or situation like that too. You could have maybe 50% of your team be new. And
Oh yeah.
that's even more difficult than it used to be because like me working on the Olympic side for so long, it's like maybe a quarter of the team is new. It was almost like kind of strategically perfect in a way. You get some transfers out, you get some seniors you had for like 3 or 4 years. So 75% of your team is returning. Coaching staff is still there. Like if you're looking at the side of a fence, like the mass majority of those individuals know the system, know our values, know what's important to them. So it's easy to indoctrinate the new ones coming in. But if you have so many kind of leaving, shuffling, coming from different backgrounds, different programs, like you have to be like confirmed like and steadfast in what your principles are and hold to those so that no
Mhm.
one comes in thinking that they're going to do it any way but the ASU way. Is that kind of something that like you are very mindful of when you were kind of creating this curriculum?
Yeah, extremely mindful of it. I think you have to be. And you know, it has to be in line with the whole organization structure and the system that we have in place. And I think that if it's not, you're going to set yourself up for a little bit of trouble and some bumps along the way. And shoot, I think everybody's adapting to the world that we're in now. And I've made mistakes, but it's one of those things where if you're not learning and changing and adapting, then you're probably going to be in some trouble. And so for us, we kind of I look at everything, in January, I look at again sort of this time of year to make sure that we've done all the things we need to do up until this point. I have those conversations with the athletes to make sure that they understand what's kind of going on, and then you move forward. I mean, my first year with Coach Dillingham, I think we had 60 something new players. In a calendar year, I think we had 60, 65 maybe turnover, right? So it's a ton. And then you go back 2 years ago, we didn't have as many. I think we had 20, right? Because we had a really successful year when we won the Big 12, and a lot of those athletes stuck around and stayed. And so that next year it was, hey, we have guys that understand what winning looks like, what the Sun Devil way looks like. And so we can deviate from that basic plan to a little bit more advanced plan to try to get them, even better than they were, right? And that's a different thing than it is when you have, for us this year, I think 46, 45 new athletes came in January, and we have to get them up to speed as quickly as possible. And it has to be everybody. It can't just be the strength staff. It has to be the head coach. It has to be the assistant coaches. It has to be the ops folks. It has to be the trainers. It has to be the strength staff, the nutrition staff. It has to be everybody so that every touch point along the way is basically speaking the same language and communicating to the athlete the same way. And that helps. That helps. But again, that takes planning on the front end. Um, there's got to be communication amongst the staff to make sure that happens. And I think, we do a pretty good job of that. I feel like with our staff and Coach Dillingham and the performance staff and the support staff, and but it's a difficult thing because it changes every year. It's always going to be different depending on how many new people you have, depending on what those athletes kind of come in like, what they are. It's just like programming, right? Like everything has to change every year because what the athlete needs dictates what you should prescribe, right? It's not the other way around. So it's that's why we do what we do. It's fun. It's a it's a lot of work, but it's fun.
Yeah, it's a fun kind of living problem that you kind of get to solve and figure out how you're getting all these people with different thought processes, like all pulling in the same direction, like different backgrounds, different abilities, different jobs, like different ways of speaking. Like you're getting everybody to pull in the same direction for the same collective goal. And we start, like you said, like rattling off all those people that are on support staff too, other coaches, staff members. It's not just the athletes that are going, but being able to speak the same message, be driving towards the same direction. Like, I think it's huge to have something like you're doing, like the curriculum, and having all your pillars laid out. So 45 new players are getting up to speed and all the coaches are kind of speaking the same message. That's huge with kind of the landscape of how this collegiate style, like, and all the NIL stuff is going at this rate.
Right. Yeah. No, it's important, and I think um, I think a lot of programs probably do something similar. But at the end of the day, if you went and worked at, we got State Farm across the street here, that's probably how you should run your organization in the business world too. A lot of those lessons and things really carry over to the business world as well.
No doubt, no doubt about that. Hey, so when it comes to like your like staff development and kind of thinking about all your programming and like pieces that you're working towards for a full season, how do you kind of like break down like the success and maybe some of like the drawbacks or things that you need to work on for the next season? Is it something that's kind of happening like collectively after a cycle? Is it happening after like a semester of a season or like just on like the bookends for your football season when it actually says, this is what we did well, this is what we need to work on? And like, how do you kind of maybe run those sessions in a way now that you have like a full staff that's dedicated to just football?
Yeah, I mean, all of that. I think it has to be all of that. We're really I'm really fortunate. I've had two of my assistants with me for a long, long time. Really three that have been with me for a long, long time. We just lost one of my assistants. Actually passed away a few weeks ago. Um, he played for me. He was, a coach at a few other places, and then we brought him here. He was with us for a few years, and so we're kind of going through the process of that and, replacing him. But um, the rest of the staff has been with me for some time, but that doesn't matter. It's still, at the beginning, before the off season begins, we tear everything up and we start fresh. We create a plan, and at any point in time throughout a given macro, meso, micro cycle, we can deviate from said plan depending on what we're seeing. And from a programming perspective, obviously from a culture perspective, things are this, very similar. We create a curriculum, what we want to get accomplished, but each week, hey, we want to get this point across this week. Well, if at the end of the week we have a conversation and we don't think that point got across, then we're going to stick with that as we move forward again. So there's a lot of communication that has to happen, both on a daily, weekly, monthly, you know, phase, year. I think it all has to be a conversation. And for us as a staff, I like my staff involved with every decision that's made. That doesn't mean that I'm going to automatically do exactly what they say every time, but I do value their opinion. And I think, uh, uh, when I first started in this, I I was really young as a head strength coach in South Carolina, and I thought I had to do it all myself. And what I've learned over the years is that I don't, and that my staff's opinion matters oftentimes more than mine does. And so I think that their insight is huge, and at the end of the day, that's helping them develop as a leader, as an assistant in this case, but ultimately, as a head, strength coach or sports performance coach or high performance coach or whatever you want to call it. Um, I think that's helping them develop so that when they get in that seat, they're better suited for it. All that stuff matter. We break it down. All right, hey, what are our goals? What do we want to accomplish? Okay, how do we get there? Right? What's a progression to get to this end result? How are we going to get there from a cultural perspective? What's our plan? How are we going to get there from a physiological perspective? What does that programming look like? What does that periodization look like? What is the exercise selection we want to use to get this goal accomplished? How do we add variety into that, but yet still get accomplished what we want to accomplish? What were some issues from the previous year that we know we need to attack this next year? There's a ton of things that how do roles change? Because we do that often too. I don't necessarily like I know a lot of staffs like, hey, this guy does all the athletic, right? He does all the speed work. He's the head speed whatever, right? That's great, but we all need to be versed in that and we all need to make collective decisions in that. So like we don't have a title like that because we're all doing that, and everything kind of runs collectively through different things. And one year it might be one person that's kind of sort of facilitating that stuff and organizing that stuff and educating themselves on that stuff. And then the next year it might be somebody else. So for me, if somebody stays with us for multiple years in a row, they're kind of versed in everything, which is what they'll need to be when they're sitting in the head seat.
Yeah, that's a great way to do it, I think, too. Like you become more well-rounded and you're preparing your assistants for head jobs like down the road too, which is I would say like most coaches are looking for that director role. I mean, any coach is really kind of a director, whether it's like positional groups or like spearheading a specific like part of the programming or training. And then, like you said, cycling it always gives people the opportunity to like dive deep into one thing and then educate the staff. But they're kind of the subject matter expert for that season. I'm sorry to hear about like your assistant as well too, like your staff member. It's a tough situation to go through for sure. Um, you definitely brought up some cool points though too, like just fine tuning and touching on like the different types of conversations you're having and kind of those check-ins. And they're throughout different points of the phase, different points of the season, semester, but they're like you said too, they're happening constantly, which is super important. Um, I wanted to kind of touch on this too, because you said you have had, like, obviously you've had coaches for such a long period of time. Like, your staff is well versed and developed. They know kind of what the message is, and you are not the type of coach that's like, it's my way or the highway. Like, everybody has insight and value to add to it. And collective, like, at the end of the day, the head guy in the seat has to make the ultimate decision, but it's nice when everybody's contributing. Um, but I want to touch on like kind of the career for those looking to get into a lot of football, especially too, because you're always kind of following coaches in a way, or like there's so much shifting in the landscape of it. But you've been around for coaches that are hired, fired, retired as well too.
Mm.
When it comes to that, like, what do you think coaches, you can't really be prepared for anything, but like do you have the opportunity like to pitch yourself or and like what you bring to the table when a new coach comes in? Is it just your experience and resume and like maybe other people vouching for you? Or oftentimes it feels like it's just like not the right guy, not the right situation. I got my own guy. Like is that inherent? Is these things kind of inherently good or bad, or how do you kind of prepare for like I don't want to say the inevitable, but like that's
Yeah.
kind of like the saying is like you're not a real strength coach until you've been fired.
Yeah, I mean, me personally, I think it's a flaw in the system. I don't, I've been fired. I've been, you know, retained, and it's, you just kind of have to navigate it, whatever the situation is, right? Like, when Coach Spurrier retired at South Carolina, we finished out the season with Sean Elliott as our interim coach, and then Will Muschamp came in, and it was a weird dynamic, and I knew he had a guy because he was just at Florida, and so I saw the writing on the wall, so I knew it. My time there was over, right? So there was no hard feelings, but I don't think anybody could really prepare you for what that's like to be, work at a place and give everything you have to a place for, 7 years, and, work 60, 70, 80 hours a week at a place, and then immediately be removed from the place where you got to turn in all your stuff, and then you're just sitting at home. At the end of the day, that's hard for anybody, but you grow from those experiences, and you understand the nuances of the game, and you understand what, as a sports performance coach, maybe drives the decision making of who your boss might ultimately be. When Coach Edwards got fired here, I had never met Coach Dillingham before. I knew some people that he knew, thankfully, but I had pictures of my house taken. We were ready to put it on the market. I had my office packed because getting retained in today's day and age is not something that happens very often. I mean, in reality, you're 5%, maybe less that actually get retained. So I was very fortunate. That process was stressful, but a great learning experience for me because I had the opportunity to basically interview for my own job, and I'm so grateful that Coach gave me that opportunity and that interview went the way that Coach liked at the end of the day because it's his decision. It's it's a different animal. I think in a perfect world, you'd be able to have some sort of quote unquote job security, but that's not how this profession is. And as long as you're okay with that, and your family in particular is okay with that, and they understand that at any point in time, somebody else's decision could determine your livelihood, right? Like that's a hard pill to swallow for a spouse, for a son or a daughter, especially if they're young, to understand that, hey, daddy's got a new job in wherever, and mommy's going to pack up the house, and you're going to be at a new school, and you're going to be, trying to make new friends. Like there's a lot of tough things that happen with that. But if at least you're aware of that in the beginning, I think that's helpful. Because it can happen. And then at that point, it's all about what your mindset is for that given scenario. Like some people might take that as an opportunity, and other people might get depressed because of it, right? It's all kind of how you sort of look at that given event, you know?
Yeah, you have to have that mindset going into it and accept that that's just part of the nature of the beast, and that's what the profession is kind of showing you. You're not going to be able to change it. Yeah, I don't know. 5%, even thinking about it, 5% sounds kind of high, but I mean, it's a difficult thing, and I don't even know. Sometimes it doesn't even last that first season if someone takes a chance on you. There seems to be so many coaches that are almost playing the game a little bit with OCs, DCs, maybe future positional coaches that they're like, oh, well, that guy doesn't have a guy yet. So
Right.
if anything happens, like I have kind of a little deal with it. And it's interesting too, like the jockeying that happens at some places with that staff of five, because everybody always thinks that they can run the show. And I mean, your seat was probably still warm by the time someone gets in it.
Yeah.
It's crazy to kind of think that. Um, and it happens in every single profession too. Like when sometimes like what if it branches close, like jobs kind of just get lost, like places go under, bankrupt, whatever it is. But in coaching, it seems like I think naively in the beginning, you're like, oh, if I work really hard, I'm good at my job, I can create my own job security by being good at what I do. Is there anything that you can really do, or is it just like, again, you got to accept the fact that like it might happen and you hope that you pick the right person, you have the family that's also on board with like, hey, this could happen if we want to stay in this career.
I mean, ultimately, if you're going to get let go, you're going to get let go. And, you know, I'd like to think that I'll use South Carolina as an example, right? Like we had a ton of success in some of those middle years, 11, 12, 13, 14. And then in 15, coach retired. So I think it was week 3 or week 4, and we had to keep the ship sailing. So for me, my focus immediately shifted from myself and anything to the players, right? Because at the end of the day, it's about the players' experience. I think that was what kind of got me through that season. We didn't have a ton of success, and just focusing on the players and making sure the players were still learning the lessons they needed to learn and enjoying their experience as much as possible in the weight room and on the field were my sole focus. And, I'd like to think that myself and my staff worked really, really hard to sort of create our own resume and make a name for ourselves, but that didn't matter at all. Um, it was, we'll see you later. And that can happen. That can happen. And it's no different than, the last year with Coach Edwards. I'd like to think that myself and our staff were the one consistent piece in, our athletes' lives, and our athletes respected the work and the consistency from the staff to hold those guys to a standard regardless of what was going on outside of the room, that the weight room was a place they wanted to be, that they enjoyed being in. But they knew they were going to get pushed, and they knew they were going to get coached, and they knew the standard was the standard, regardless of what was happening on the outside. And in that instance, one of the main things for me that sort of saved us, quote unquote, here was when Coach Dillingham met with the roster. He met with each player individually, and it was really the final sort of feather in the cap of our staff was that every player, almost to a man, said that they really liked the way we trained, and they really liked the culture of the weight room. And so what the players think does matter. It matters a lot, and I think it matters even more in today's day and age because the players have a voice, and rightfully so. They should. And now there's a financial investment in those individuals as well. So having to have those conversations becomes even more important, right? Not just for culture building, but also for the relationship, right? Because yeah, there's going to be bumps and bruises along the way, but as a coach, you have to be able to repair relationships pretty rapidly and get the work done because again, you don't have a lot of time. But yeah, that was one key factor that I think is really important in quote unquote job security, right? I mean, when Coach Dillingham got here and we went through the whole interview process, and it was about a week, and I told my staff ultimately when we were retained and I got the job, I said, look, I said, this is a completely different job. It's not the same job it was before. I need you guys to mentally look at it that way. Like, park in a different spot in the parking lot if that's what it takes. Like, take a different route into the building so you can change your mindset and understand that this new staff is going to require different things from us. It's not the same job. So you can't say, well, this is how we did it before because it doesn't matter. And so I think that being aware of that and having sort of a mindset along those lines was helpful for me. And I really only kind of thought that way because of previous experiences. So yeah, I think for a young coach trying to get in, and it's important to just understand what can happen.
Yeah, that's great. That's great advice. I wouldn't not thought of that in that way. And I'm not sure if I like consciously even did that, having some changes with staff, like especially like Olympic turnover happens and you have two, three, four, five, whatever, however many teams that you have, like inevitably, like you're going to have turnover with some of those Olympic coaches, and
Yeah.
they just get with who they get. Like unless like within the staff it changes. I know you dealt with that too at different stops, and obviously like everybody knows Harvard has 41 sports. So,
42.
oh, 42. See, I
42.
don't
Yeah.
want to shortchange them on any of those. Um, and I do want to touch on like 'cause some of the weight room culture stuff, but It's interesting, and it's a testament to you as a coach and just as a man, like when Coach Berry retires, like shifting the focus to the guys because that's someone who was probably recruiting them from years, someone that they looked up to, might be the whole reason they went to that school. That's that's coming crashing down in the middle of the season, whether it's timely or untimely, like is here neither here nor there, but like that definitely affects stuff. And I mean, I dealt with the same thing during COVID, and two of my teams got cut, like, and they were told that they would be discontinuing their season. Like after the season was over, the sports are done. So you can like I know exactly how it feels to like their world is ending. Like rather than like college sports is done, like what am I going to do after? It's like it feels like it's taken from you in a different way, and the focus is away from the field and their performance and them enjoying it to like there's no I have to leave if I have another year. I can't go here anymore. It's it's definitely a hard thing to kind of deal with, and it happens too with coaching where the rug can kind of get ripped out from underneath you, even though you've invested everything in it. You could be alumni from there too. You could be anything, and
Yeah.
it's just done no matter how hard you work at it.
Life's not fair, and I think that difficult times are absolutely paramount in like personal development. And if you can look at it that way, and you can somehow convince yourself, especially in the beginning, that it's an opportunity, it's not a uh, insurmountable mountain you have to climb. It's an opportunity for, you know, growth. It's an opportunity for change in a positive way. Then it's, you know, you're better off. You're better off that way.
So like when you sit down, I know we talked about like how you kind of change programming, kind of evaluate stuff like throughout the season and communicate with your staff, and then obviously like the football coaches and support staff too. How do you kind of define success for yourself and maybe your staff that you have the most control over? Like wins and losses can happen. That's inevitable. That's something that's going to always weigh on like your staff and like the football team as well. But like obviously the players vouching for you and like loving the culture and what you guys offer, like that's huge. But like how do you guys actually sit and calculate like what is the thing that we need to do in order for this to be a successful program, a successful season, successful culture? Like what are kind of your non-negotiables when it comes to that?
Yeah, I think, you know, it depends on what your pillars are, right? Right. What are things that, you know, your head coach wants to hammer home? So you figure out creative ways to hammer those things home. And then, you know, the nice thing is after a few years with an individual, you kind of know what those things are and you can, you know, systematically tweak previous plans to make sure that you're getting those things accomplished in a given period of time. I think physiologically, we look at a ton of different things to try to drive performance. It's you know we have player profiles and we have you know all sorts of KPIs that we're looking at on a sometimes weekly basis, sometimes you know biweekly, sometimes monthly basis to drive the physiology of the athlete in the direction you want to drive it. There's you know as long as your goal for whatever it is, whether it's cultural or physiological or something else, as long as your goal is moving in the direction you want it to be, like if, you know, we want to gain muscle mass as a team, right? Are we gaining muscle mass as a team or are we not? Right? Is our plan moving the needle in the direction we want it to move? And if it is, then we continue to push that until that goal changes in a subsequent phase and we want to elicit a different response, right? It's no different. Um, I think for anybody or anything, whether it's somebody that wants to lose weight or somebody that wants to get stronger in a back squat or a deadlift or a bench press or somebody that wants to become a better Olympic weightlifter, there's am I moving the needle in the right direction? And at the end of the day, too, you have to be aware that, progress isn't linear. There's ebbs and flows, but as long as those high water marks are continuing to trend in the right direction, then you're doing yourself a service. In the old days, it was always pre-post, right? Back in the day, it was pre-post test. You might train for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks. Well, with technology nowadays, we can organically weave testing and evaluation into our programming and our planning where our athletes don't even know they're being evaluated. And we can basically decide whether what we're putting them through is actually doing what we want it to do to them physiologically, which to me is what we use technology for. It allows us to reaffirm our thought processes and all of our experience and learning from a practical perspective with a data point. And that, for me has reaffirmed some of my beliefs and also disproven some of my beliefs. The data, you can't really argue with the data if, your system is uniform throughout a given year, right? So I mean, you could talk about it all day. It's extremely important to check on yourself and make sure that the decisions you're making are actually doing what you want them to do.
Yeah, t technology is great for that too, because I know exactly what you're saying. Like oftentimes with like teams that maybe didn't prioritize the weight room or didn't see maybe the full benefit, or maybe just smaller programs that didn't like chose practice over it or days off. Like pre and post was like kind of all you got a lot of times. If you couldn't convince a coach that like what you were doing was the best bang for their buck and where they wanted to actually put their time and value in. So that's all you got. And they could be sick the last day. They could be like
Yeah.
sick the first day and like it skews
Yeah.
everything. But
Yeah.
it also shows like when you have a program and it's everything's laid out, like you can catch like maybe biases you have or like issues within the program earlier on so that you don't get 12, 16 weeks out and you're like, oh, everybody went down in this. Like, where was the fault in the program? Well, I got to look back through like 12 plus weeks of what we were doing to see like what actually happened versus, well, we're kind of embedding testing into it. We have this technology to like back it up a little. Oh, well, this happened here. We can kind of shift focus and make sure that we're still going towards the goal. So if you got it, use it because it's super helpful. But like coach's eyes is usually pretty spot on. This just kind of makes sure that like you said, it reaffirms that you're on the right path.
Yeah. At the end of the day, too, like a good accomplished coach, somebody that's seen a lot of athletes go through a given training phase and knows what they kind of want to accomplish in a given training phase is oftentimes going to have an inkling for what the force plate's going to tell them, right? They're going to say, well, we've been going at this thing now for 8 weeks now, you know, are we going to see an improvement in power production right now, or do we need super compensation to occur? And then can we retest and then subsequently, what we actually did was a fatigue issue, right? Because it was a long training phase. We basically, got these athletes to a given point. We allowed them to super compensate. Yeah, hey, you test at the end, the data doesn't look that great. You give them a week for spring break and then you retest them and then everybody's numbers are through the roof. Then, okay, now, hey, what we did actually was moving the needle in the right direction.
Yeah, exactly. And I wanted to shift back a little bit to kind of what we were touching on, like when it comes to weight room culture and obviously like the feedback that you kind of got through like the coaching staff change and hearing like from them and going through the interview process, like how much the players like appreciated and valued that stuff. Like the weight room culture really ends up getting dictated and like starts with that, like you, like, and how you kind of approach things. Like, how important is like your own training and like what you do, like as an athlete that really kind of, it seems like kickstarts, not athlete. You've done every, we'll get into it. You've done like every single sport. You've done Highland Games, powerlifting, strongman. I think you even ran a marathon as well. You've been
Mm.
so you've pushed yourself to the limits. You played college baseball. Like I'm giving you athlete, even if you want to air quote it. But how how important is it for you to like still stay on top of that stuff? It's just ingrained in you, but like how much do you think that like actually subconsciously or consciously like drives a little bit of the culture and what you feel is what you pride yourself on as a coach in the weight room?
Yeah, I think there's so many positives to as a as a sports performance coach to train yourself. I think, selfishly, you are staying healthier. You're becoming a better version of yourself. You're able to coach at a high level with a high cadence without getting fatigued. You can coach multiple groups throughout the day. You can coach for 6, 8 hours a day. It makes you a better version of yourself, like with the nuts and bolts of actually like coaching, demonstrating. Can you demonstrate basically all the movements you want? Our athletes are visual athletes, and so I still, even to this day, demonstrate everything I want them to do exactly the way I want them to do it before they actually do it, myself and my staff. And I think that's extremely important. I think as a strength coach that trains, there's a respect factor from the athletes that understand that, hey, he's not just trying to kill us. There's actually a reason and a why behind what we're doing. And it's so important to the staff that they're actually doing it too. I think that's really important. And then knowing what that given event, whatever it is, or given exercise, or given, conditioning session actually feels like. And knowing when, hey, for you, when it got challenging, a little bit better what to say and how to get those athletes to push themselves to give a little bit more. Um, I train in the morning real early before our first group. That's just for me, it logistically it makes the most sense because if I get up early enough, nobody's really trying to pull me in a different direction or lobby for my intent, my attention, and I can shut the phone off and keep it off and not have to worry and train. And they're the athletes are sort of coming in and they see me doing something or they see me and my staff doing something. They come down and they might take a look and help us, get through it. And they're like, "Oh, coach, we got that today." It's like, "Yeah, man, whew, that was rough, but hey, you guys are going to do it. You guys can get through it." And it doesn't have to be exact. I've had to deviate from, I'm about to be 44, so like I can't, I got different things that have gone on, but at the end of the day, I'm still out there trying to do as much as I can that's as similar to for that, 16, 18, 20 weeks of training that's very similar to what, I'm going to ask our athletes to do. And I learned a lot, programming for myself for Olympic lifting, for powerlifting, for strongman, you know, for running, distance running, for all the different things that are basically variables in physiology, and how do you educate yourself on that? I just think that whether or not you take it to the level that I tend to take things to, you're still learning and you're still adapting and you're still educating yourself on what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. I mean, sometimes you gotta take it to the breaking point to see. And I mean, it maybe it's a little bit too far, but at the end of the day, we're asking athletes to like go beyond what they think their capabilities are. We see their potential. It's so much easier when you're able to relate to how difficult they're going through. And it might not be football, because I've worked with, and I know same thing, you've probably worked with athletes like you've never played their sport, but
Mhm.
like when they're getting to a sticking point or they're getting to something where like maybe their confidence is shaken or it's something, a weight they've never handled or a pressure situation, like you can revert back to something you've already experienced before and talk them through it or motivate them in different ways. And I think that's like, it doesn't have to be a movement clicking, but that's again where athletes like buy into what you're telling them to do because a lot of the stuff is difficult. But I know another one you touched on too is like the fact that like you're training like an athlete, you're doing all these different adventures, like you've touched on different things and kind of seen what your capabilities are to try different sports, but still being able to demo what you're showing the athletes because they are always visual. That is huge. And I've always told that to interns. We've made different GAs and interns in the past, like, oh, put a program together for this sport and we'll compare it to what I already have for the program. Cool. What you put in it, you're running it. Whatever the conditioning is. I don't care if you're doing bodybuilding, like
Yeah.
you putting gassers for this lacrosse team, you're running them. Like, let's see if this actually works because the players, if you move well, the players are going to understand. And if you don't move well, like you lost a lot of respect with them because you're telling them something that you don't have the ability to even do, like with an empty bar. It's like
Yeah.
it's out the window.
Yeah, I think at a certain point, I'm kind of going through a lot of that now where, can I, drop under a snatch as well as I used to be able to? Probably not, especially after having done probably snatch, 3 or 4 hours before that and subsequently like cooled off and been fatigued from it. Like it doesn't always look as good as it used to, or it did, 4 or 5 hours before that. But at the end of the day, you're still trying. And I think they athletes see that and they respect that and they understand that.
No, for sure. It's definitely different. So you've gone through all these different ventures, you've tried different sports, like you've kind of pushed your body to different limits with all this stuff. Like how do you kind of in a practical way like make sure that like the strength culture like lasts for a long time? Like you talked about like some of the recovery methods and other things that you kind of have to do. Like how do you kind of take some of these factors into place, like the wear and tear, like being on your feet coaching and stuff like that? Like are you mindful of that when you start putting your own program together a little bit more now?
Yeah, it's hard at the end of the day if you're, you know, for me at, 43 about to be 44 is how I'm going to feel going to mm, influence what our elite front seven program is going to look like. No, it's not because I have enough time under the bar and enough experience with what I want to get accomplished from that group that it's not going to change that. Now, will what I do be maybe slightly different? Yeah, probably. A little bit more nuanced, a little bit more sort of by feel as opposed to not so much. But even now with some of the technology, you feel pretty good. At the end of the day, I think most of my crazy ventures in this, world, different things I've tried, different things I, you know, put as a goal and then ultimately tried to accomplish usually happen outside of that sort of 20-week window somewhere because I know I can't combine those two things. I can't pull all the levers at once anymore. Not to say that that's ever good, but you can't do that all the time. Then you definitely can't do that as you age. You got to be a little bit more mindful. You still got to do some recovery stuff. We have a bunch of recovery things in the facility that I try to incorporate as much as I can, but sometimes time doesn't allow that. I probably don't do enough soft tissue. I probably don't, get in the cold tub or the hot tub or do some contrast as much as I should. But I sort of have this, voice in the back of my head when I get up in the morning that says, "Hey, dummy, this afternoon you may want to mix in a little bit of this because you're walking funny. You and you got to be on your feet for 8 hours today, and you might want to maybe mix in a little bit of this." So there's a little bit of that, but for our programming, no, it doesn't change the athletes' programming. It changes probably my programming a little bit, but other than that, no.
No, it's good. It's good to kind of hear that stuff too and understand like, especially like when you're training alone, like even if you have the staff around sometimes too, like you're being as long into the game and like training for as long as you have, like being under the barbell, like you're very cognizant of like how you operate, how you move, how you respond to stuff too. So it's me training by myself for as long as I have, like doing strongman, like in the storage unit by myself for hours on Saturdays, or going to throw like for Highland games by myself in the field for a couple hours. Like you get in that mindset of like trying to not sometimes talk yourself out of things, but also like your mind plays tricks on you, like, oh, this is actually the smart approach for the long term. Like does that ever kind of for you like come into play where you're like, you know what? Like I'm gonna be
Yeah.
on my feet for 8 hours. Like maybe I'm not gonna do that drop set because of this. Or is that just like your own way of like negotiating with yourself?
I think it depends on the day. It depends on the time in the phase. There's a lot of variables there, but I will say, on the opposite end of that, being able to be invested in the program is in particular when it's, a big day. I think having done it and felt it creates blinders as a coach to be completely 100% committed to what it is you're going to do that day. And for me, a lot of times I don't want to do it, right? I'm just being honest. Like there's days where I wake up and I'm like, oh, holy shit, I feel awful. And, the first thought that comes into my mind is, well, the athletes might feel the same way, but they don't get a choice, so I don't give myself a choice. Um, and I think, yeah, you balance that mindset with, okay, you're 43, like let's try to not be able to pick up your kids later on this evening, right? So there's a give and a take to all that, but yeah, I mean, for me, the athletes motivate me to get out of bed at 3:45, right? They motivate me to get up. They motivate me to get under the bar when I don't necessarily feel like it. And I'll be honest, I don't know if I'd like to think I'm so mentally tough, right? But I don't know as though I would do all the things that I do if it wasn't for them at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think everybody has different motivation or things that like you internally like harp on or focus in when it comes to training and like having like players like understanding that like you training, you're the best version of yourself. You're the best that you can approach the athletes, like all the benefits that you have selfishly for yourself, health wise, but all the things that you like learn along the process makes you a better coach and you want to be the best version for them. Like that's a huge motivation factor too, which is I mean, it's a great thing to like drive your training and continue to pursue it because the end of the day, like you could probably still be just as good of a coach as you are if you're just like, yeah, I'm not going to train today. I'm not going to do all these things, but like over time, I'm sure the players will start to catch on. But like you still have the same certifications, you still have the same education. You could, what I'm saying is like you could stop. Like in all things, like you've learn more in a lifetime. You have enough experience under the bar that like you don't necessarily need to gain more. I know you would drive yourself insane, but you could stop and still have more knowledge and experience than a lot of coaches will ever have, like getting through the profession, and you could still coach in a way, but it's just inherently against you and like how you want to coach and how you want to actively like be involved in the profession.
Yeah, I don't know, call it stubborn or call it whatever. It's just to say it's the same reason why we make, all our interns do the program. They can select which block they want to do, but they have to do the program. They have to feel it. And after a given training phase, they write their own program, right? And then they do that like you were referring to. I just think it's something that my mentors always drove into me, and I just think it's really, really important. I was talking to a veteran strength coach who just retired, who's at the same place forever. And I he came to visit and he was like, finally training again. And I kind of looked at him and he's like, yeah, he's like, I just didn't have time to train before. He was at a lower division school, but he was there forever and had a ton of success. He's like, I'm finally training again. I'm really enjoying training. And I was like, man, if I had to give up training when it's 10 feet in front of me and I didn't have enough time to train, I don't think I could do it. I would have to find, that's why I have to get up so early. If it meant I had to get up at 2 in the morning, I would get up at 2 in the morning just because I for me and my mental health and my sanity, I need it, you know?
Yeah, and I think that stuff too like drives your training too. Like especially getting it in on the front end, now you can focus everything you have on the players. Like I found it so much more difficult to do it on the back end when you're already drained.
Oh,
It's miserable. As much as I love my garage gym, like coming back after coaching all day, it's one of the last things you want to do.
it's tough. I can't. I've tried. It's one thing if you're in spring ball and, for us, we have a really good morning heavy schedule. So, at 2 o'clock, I'm sort of wrapped for the day. There's not a ton going on logistically. Maybe I had a meeting or two, and I got a couple hours before I got to pick up my daughter at school or something. I can knock some training out then. But when you're in the thick of it, especially in the off season, for me, it has to get done in the morning or it's not going to get done. Um, because I mean, you know how it is. Like my phone's not, it's not, it's going to be going off till 7 o'clock at night, and then I gotta get my process going for bed, and then I gotta put my kids down, and I gotta eat, and I gotta fuel, and then I gotta take my supplements, and then I gotta shower, and then I gotta read, and then I gotta go to sleep, and then I gotta do it all again the next day. So it's like everything's kind of structured for me. And in the same sense, that helps me educate an athlete on what a really good structure for their day looks like too. Like how much can I mash into this day to get the most bang for my buck so that I'm ready to train and I'm ready to coach, I'm ready to be a dad, right? Like how does that look? And then how do you manipulate that for an athlete that wants to be the best version of themselves for practice and for meetings, right? Okay, what does your day look like? All those things are um, lessons that can be learned.
Yeah, that time management skill, especially like if a coach and understanding all the different things that are going to pull you in different directions, like your own training, your schedule, coaching meetings, like family life, kids, all that stuff. Like everybody only has those 24 hours in a day, and like you got to figure out what to kind of cut out and the best way to optimize all those things. You start taking
Yeah,
a lot of the fluff out real quick when you realize like there's a lot of things that I want to do. There's a lot of things I need to do. There's a lot of things I'd want, like, have to be done. You got to find a way to do them. And training is one of the ones that I really don't want to take out. So I'm going to find the time for it.
yeah,
Hey,
yeah. I feel the
so
same way.
one thing I wanted to ask you too, like, obviously with all your experience, like being a director at multiple places as well and having staffs, like, even overseeing Olympic departments and like the whole department in general too, you kind of harped on a lot of the things that are important for yourself, a lot of the things that like your staff also does, like being able to like training, like growth and like continuing education, like having communication skills and making sure you're all on the same page. Like obviously you're very dedicated to your craft. What are some of the things that like you really look for when it comes to like either interns or maybe it's the same exact stuff like if you're looking to bring on another person to the full-time staff. Um, what are some of those things that are like, hey, in order to be here, this is what we kind of look for to join the staff? Because some places like they'll take anybody that's eager. Some places will say like these are the bare minimums, but what are kind of the things that you look for a coach maybe that'll be successful going down the road?
I think it depends on the position. If it's an intern, we try to look for somebody that actually wants to be in the sports performance world, doesn't want to necessarily be in the football world because there's a lot of that. We like people that are going to invest their time in sports performance and this side of things and having common sense and being a good person, simple stuff for that position. And um, being a good soldier and doing the dirty work and doing certain things that maybe they didn't think they were going to have to do, but they're going to do, and they're going to do it with a smile, and they're going to do it to the best of their ability. For a assistant, for me, I've been fortunate. Like I told you, I've had, a lot of assistants that are with me for a long time. I prefer to have a relationship with that individual before I hire them. That's extremely important to me. I like them to have had some experience, whether it be as an intern or as a player or as an assistant previously, um, within our system somewhere along the way. So for me, that's important, but it's not a deal breaker. I think the resume and the recs and all that stuff kind of come into the fold in that decision making. And then also too, like what does this individual bring to our staff that maybe we don't have or we want to bring in that helps us become a better staff? And then how do they get along with the staff? Um, are they, do they get along with the staff? Are they, a good part of our culture? Because our culture is important just as much as the team's culture is important.
No, those are great things to kind of look for. They build on each other too. Like obviously, like the assistants, like all the intangibles that come with an intern, like that's kind of the baseline. Like this is the things that you have to do, and then obviously
Yeah.
like working your way up the career and having someone like that is familiar to you or has been in the system before makes it a little bit easier too to like break it in. You've seen it both
Yeah.
ways, and like there's always going to be that curve with some recommendations that are glowing and they turn out to be duds, and some of them that are like, I'm not really sure, and maybe someone takes a chance or sees some potential and they end up to be studs moving forward and have really successful careers, whether they're or moving on. It's but having at least some things that you specifically look for. And I think that the big one when you're talking about like a tight-knit staff and you have so many people and so many athletes, like you have to be a good fit. And
Yeah.
some people hate to hear it and like there's a guy for it, but at the end of the day, like as many hours you are spending together, like you have to like be able to get along with each other.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
Hey, so Coach, I wanted to ask kind of this one thing. Um, Throughout all the experience and everything that you've been through, like all the different kind of changes, you've had so many different opportunities, like for learning lessons. You've been at places for short stints, like for your own reasons, longer places, going back like to hometown, like different moves and stuff like that. What do you think was like maybe the biggest lesson that you've learned over your career that continuously like impacts some of the things that you undo? Like maybe a defining moment or even like maybe a moment like within your career so far that like maybe either questioned why you're in it or really solidified why you're in it?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think getting fired at South Carolina was one of it was the best thing that ever happened to me um, in my career because as a young head strength coach, I think you tend to get a big ego, especially when you've had a lot of success, and you might think that that success was your doing. And I think that I certainly fell within that world. And I think that's, young people in general that have success, right? How do you respond to the success might be more important than how you respond to the failure, at the end of the day. So for me, getting fired at South Carolina was, in retrospect, a blessing because I think it changed me as a coach, as a person, as a man, and it changed me for the better. I think there was about 2 weeks where I didn't have a job. I was very fortunate to find a job, and that job was at University of Massachusetts. Um, you know, I'm from there. It was with a head coach that I sort of had a relationship with, and it was a blessing because I went from a place that had nothing but noise in regards to the fan base and the oversight and everything, right? The SEC it's crazy. You couldn't go out to dinner without somebody recognizing you, and you know, my family felt that, I felt that, the pressure of that. When you're having success, it's wonderful. And when you're not having success, it's not so wonderful. And um, that's a lot, I think, for anyone to deal with. As a young coach, I don't think you quite know how to deal with it as well as maybe if I went back and did that now. I think at a place like that, not to say that ASU isn't like that because it is, but you know what I'm saying. And I think that going to UMass was a time for me to reflect. It was a time for me to reorganize, to learn, to adapt, to uh, redevelop and create something new and something different. Uh, it it really helped me with my programming, with my relationship to the players, to my development of creating a staff. It was just a new thing, and I loved every minute. I mean, I almost stayed. I love University of Massachusetts, and I love the administration there. I love the head coach that I worked for when I was there. And you put ASU and UMass next to each other, and you're like, this is a no-brainer. It wasn't a no-brainer for me. That's how much I really enjoyed my time there. I think I learned a ton from the failures and the successes that we had and how important the successes were. I think I learned how to enjoy the success. I think I also learned how to cope with and deal with and spin the failure. Um, it was a tremendous experience for me as a coach, and I still think about it to this day. I think that was probably a really singular defining moment for me, and understanding who I was and understanding my flaws as a coach and as a person. And it changed me. It changed me forever. And it was one of the best lessons I could have ever learned.
No, that's great. I didn't like obviously I'm sure a lot of people didn't know all that stuff when it came to it. And it's obviously it's very personal to you and like understanding those things. And you said a lot of things like just reevaluate, reassessing, like reorganizing. And so all these things that are part of like an ongoing process of you being able to kind of take a step back and start anew at a different program. Because it feels like a lot of times at some of those ones, and like obviously you said going in as a young head coach too, like there's a lot of things that you're experiencing for the first time at South Carolina, and you're learning at a fast pace. It's a fast moving train that you're probably you're probably like getting so much done in one day that you're not really have much more than maybe next day planned. Like you can't even go too far out because there's so much stuff on your plate, and now you'll be able to take a step back, start anew with all the experience that you gained at like that same tempo of a place. Now do it with UMass, different situation, different circumstances, different staff, now more experience, and your philosophy is completely not different, but it's like you're more prepared for like what's about to happen, and it's a huge change of pace going in for the second time. And I know every coach has said it too, like you don't really know what that head coach is going through until you're actually in that seat. And that's probably a lot of what you're experiencing going back and taking on the second director role.
Yeah, there's no doubt. You alluded to it earlier, right? Like everybody, so what's the saying? Heavy weighs the crown, right? Like everybody thinks they can sit in the seat until they really understand a lot of the nuances of what the position actually requires, right? And that's different for everybody, depending on the situation. But, for me to do what we do, it requires a lot. And it was just a great experience. It was a great learning experience. And it was a place that I'll forever be grateful for.
That's awesome. Well, hey, coach, like any good training session, we got to end the show with a finisher. So I got four quarters, four questions, and probably overtime at the end. You can go rapid fire, or if you want to expand on any, feel free to. But you ready for the first one?
Yeah, fire away.
All right, first one I got for you. Biggest influence in the strength and conditioning profession.
Okay. I got three. Um, Dr. Ellen Robinson, who was my basically program director at Bridgewater State. She was an absolute savage. She was I think, professional marathon runner. She was a bodybuilder back in the day. She was a world-class Olympic weightlifter. Um, she was our coach of our Olympic weightlifting team at Bridgewater. So like nuts and bolts, like what to do, why to do it. One of my favorite human beings too. She's a tremendous person, first and foremost. Secondarily to that, it's Craig Fitzgerald. One of my best friends. I talked to him yesterday, where he brought me up in the early part of my career and was gracious enough to pass me off to Joe Ken and then bring me back. Joe Ken, another one. You want to talk about programming and 500 level class and what football programming or programming in general looks like. One of the greatest years of my life was at University of Louisville. From a programming perspective, I learned so much. Um, those three individuals really have molded me and poured all their knowledge into me and have been nothing but a resource even to this day.
That's great. Yeah. Coach Fitz, like Coach Ken, and obviously like hearing about your professor over at Bridgewater, that's impressive too to go through all those different feats of strength and like throughout the course of a year and still be teaching as well too. So that's awesome.
I think she was a Olympic caliber swimmer also
Oh,
at one point in time.
all
She's
right.
just unbelievable. Yeah, unbelievable.
That's wild. Hey, so when you're
Yeah.
not coaching, not training or anything, what are some of maybe your hobbies that fall outside of like the weight room walls?
Right now it's just being a dad. It's we got my daughter Callie is 4.5 and my son Cade is 2.5. We, waited a long time to have those two, and they take up a lot of time, every ounce of time, pretty much. Outside of the training and the coaching, but they're awesome, and they've taught me so much about myself, and you know, they're getting to the point now where they start to be reflections of you, and you get mad at them for being a reflection of you in certain situations where you're like, where did they learn that? And then you kind of look in the mirror and you're like, wow, they learned that from me. Awesome. So then you got to kind of reevaluate yourself and change yourself in some instances.
Oh yeah, that's a good learning tool right there for sure.
Yeah.
Hey, so if I know you before gotten into coaching, like there could be a comeback maybe for fire EMT, but well, I don't know. We'll see if it's shifted from now. But if you weren't coaching right now, what do you think you might be doing as an alternate profession if either given the choice or kind of force the cards on?
I couldn't do anything in like the fitness profession.
No, you could do
Has
fitness
to be
profession. It
outside.
could be something different, yeah.
It would probably be uh, some sort of online coaching. I think something like that. And I always said, and I don't know if it's ever going to come to fruition because I haven't picked up my club since I had kids, but coaching golf, like not actually coaching golf, but like performance side of golf. I've always been really interested in that, and I think golf in general does a really good job of sort of using technology and evaluating, and I think there's lessons to be learned in that, and I always thought that was really interesting.
Okay. Hey, so I know morning training, you've got the radio and stuff to yourself. So if you're setting up an ideal training day for yourself, like what's playing on the speakers and what is your favorite post-training meal look like?
Different themes depending on the day. So Monday, the athletes get to pick what they want, and more often than not, that's some form of rap. So I typically listen to what the athletes listen to on a given day. So Monday is sort of their day. They listen to whatever they want to listen to. I don't know any of the names. I just kind of set the Pandora account and let it run, or the Spotify account and let it run. Tuesday is techno, so we listen to some form of techno. Thursday is usually old school. I try to educate them on some of the great hip hop artists from the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. And then Friday we listen to hard rock. Favorite post training meal depends on time. I just got done like changing my entire body, which was a whole nother thing that I wanted to try to do. Um, so right now it would be like 96.4 ground beef with 2 cups of rice and some veggies on the side. But uh, you know, I think in years past it was probably a double meat burrito from Chipotle or something like that.
Yeah, everybody,
Yeah, but
everybody wants to hear the wheels like fall off meal.
yeah, no, I don't do that much anymore. I've been 280 in my life, and right now I'm about 218. I've been as light as 170, 197 was as light as I got this past season to try to get really, really lean, which was the first time I ever did that in my life. So I'm kind of settling in right at 220, 225, and hopefully I can stay there for a little while.
There you go. I know it's another thing I've heard you add to the new list of training goals was to get as low body fat as possible. So I mean, that takes a lot of dedication. It's definitely a different beast to kind of tame for sure than some of the other like maybe more tangible goals when it comes to like performance-based numbers and stuff. So last one I got for you for overtime though, coach. All right.
Okay.
You could pick but either your favorite part of coaching or favorite part of training and competing. It could be the same thing, or you can touch on either of them.
My favorite part of coaching is the education. and seeing the lessons that you tried to instill in the athletes come to fruition. Sometimes that happens relatively quickly. Sometimes it happens while they're with you. Sometimes it happens when they leave you and then they come back and they tell you about it. But that's my favorite part. I love when former athletes, especially, in our world, they go on to the NFL and they come back and they say, Coach, you were right. Here's what happened. Here's how I handled it. And I handled it because of this lesson that you tried to instill in me. That's my absolute favorite part. What was the second part?
Favorite part of like training or
Sorry.
competing? Because I know you've gone on so many different ventures. Like, there's got to be something that ties together.
It's the process. I love the planning, and then I love the execution of that plan. And then obviously the ultimate goal is great, but oftentimes for me, the previous two kind of phases of that are more fun. Um, when I squatted 500 the same day I ran a marathon, uh that was not that much fun on the day, but the planning for it and how I kind of went about it was so much fun, and I learned a ton. So that was great.
That's awesome. Well, I mean, again, like you said it too with both of those, like learning from the process too, and seeing if it's possible and a well executed plan like that. I mean, you're gonna see a benefit, or you're gonna figure out real quick, like maybe we'll shift how we do it next time.
Yeah, and you change your mind and your mindset on things that are really challenging. Like I don't know if you follow. I think his name's Fergus Crowley. He's doing 10 Ironmans in 10 cities in 10 days. He's doing
Ooh,
it right now. Right now. And if you follow him on Instagram, he's up, he's down. I think he's on day 7 or day 8 right now, and he's
ooh.
done it so far. But just to put it in perspective, like you think what you're doing is hard or challenging or difficult or insurmountable, but at the end of the day, there's somebody out there doing something that's 20 times as challenging as what you're doing, and they're doing it with a smile on their face, or they're going through it or whatever. And I guess anything's really possible if you can train your mind and train your body to do it. That's he's the one. I'm pretty sure he's the one that I saw that motivated me to do the 500 squat and then run a marathon because but he had an added variable. He ran a 5-minute mile, then squatted 500, then ran a marathon on the same day.
Ugh.
And I was like, well, I don't think I can do all three of those, but I definitely think I can squat 500 and run a marathon. So, I took 16 weeks and made that a plan. I gave it to myself for my 40th birthday that that's what I was going to do. And I trained for that and I ultimately did it. But he still ran a 5-minute mile before that. And now the guy's doing 10 Ironmans, full Ironmans in 10 consecutive days in 10 cities. So you're adding travel into that on top of a potentially 12-hour or 15-hour event on a given day. So you're adding sleep deprivation. Forget it. Like what the human body's capable of is absolutely amazing if you're in the right state to do it.
Yeah, that mindset to actually one to think it up, and then two to like plan it and actually execute it and like do something that no one has done before, like insurmountable, like the 2 mile time or the 2 hour marathon being broken by like three people in the same year. Like all these things that we thought were insurmountable, like the human body is incredible and the mind is even crazier for being able to execute on what the body would normally fail on. So I
Would
mean,
that guy
I'll have
run
to
like a
check that out.
four? Would that guy run like a 4:33 pace for 26.2 miles? Something like that? I mean,
Yes.
come on. The 5-minute mile was impossible. The human body was going to explode, right? That wasn't that long ago.
And to do it 26 times essentially.
Casually. I mean, he wasn't even breathing heavy at the end.
It's it's remarkable what some people can do. And now again that shifts the goalposts. So
Yeah.
we'll see what other people are doing from here on out. But I'm excited. I'll have to definitely check that guy out as well too, because I mean, one Ironman, like a lot of people quit even during it. So 10, insane. Well, Coach, this has been awesome. I appreciate all your time. For anybody that might have some follow-up questions for you or want to kind of see what you got going on, pick your brain, or follow along the Sun Devils football team this upcoming fall season, where can they kind of like find that information on you?
Yeah, Instagram, X, Twitter. I have a Facebook page, but it's kind of dead. Those two, they can certainly reach out to me via email or something like that. I don't really have a lot of other ventures at the moment to publicize. That's kind of it. But that's uh, that's where they'll find me. I'm usually pretty active on Instagram.
Awesome. Well, like I said, Coach, this has been awesome. I appreciate you taking some time out. Hopefully you can enjoy the rest of the time off before summer training kicks into full gear. But appreciate your time and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Nick. No, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
That's it for this episode of The Strength Game. Thank you again to this week's guest and to our sponsors. Be sure to connect and keep up with our guests at the links in the description below. Remember to subscribe to us on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast provider to stay up to date on all future episodes. Also, check us out on YouTube and CoachO'Brien.com, where you can find all the video versions of these episodes, as well as show notes, episode schedule, and much more. Comments, ratings, and reviews are always welcome and appreciated. Thanks again for tuning in, and be sure to join us next week for another great episode of The Strength Game.